Welcome back to Reading Reveries and another episode of Jaunting Through Books. I am your host Kasturi, and you and I together will lose ourselves into a little bit of reading for the next few minutes. The last episode we had travelled to 1930s London, and now I'll tempt you to journeying with me to the 1700s English countryside to meet a hearty, red-blooded Tory gentleman, the baronet of Worcestershire, by the name of Sir Roger de Coverley. Have you heard of him before? Sir Roger de Coverley? Just in case you haven't, Sir Roger de Coverley was a character concocted by Joseph Addison to represent the then contemporary typical landed country gentleman who was also a dignified member of the famous imaginary Spectator Club. The Spectator Club was first introduced to the English when the second number of a double-column sheet of a small folio called the Spectator was first laid upon all coffee-house tables of London on the morning of the 2nd of March, Friday, 1711. This second number of the Spectator, which introduced the imaginary Spectator Club, was written by Richard Steele, in which Sir Roger first appears. So though the original suggestion for the character of Sir Roger seems to have come from Steele, it is to Addison's keener perceptions and nicer art that we owe most of those subtle and humorous touches of characterization which make the portrait of Sir Roger so real and so human. The Sir Roger de Coverley papers are often said to be the precursor of the modern English novel, and Sir Roger probably is one of the earliest imaginative prose characters with a subtle touch of healthy realism. It was only obvious for Samuel Richardson and Henry Fielding 30 years later to bring together several such genuine characters into a group and to show how the incidents of their characters' lives naturally ran into a plot. And today, hence, we have what we call a novel. The 56-year-old Sir Roger's many adventures are no more striking than might naturally befall a country squire. And there were scores of just such men in every shire in England back then. Sir Roger's speech, his habits, his prejudices are all shown us with simple truth, and yet Addison pours into his depictions such art and humour that Sir Roger becomes one of the most living persons in English literature. Addison delightfully cuts out the old knight's rusticity, his ignorance of the urbane, his obsolete but kindly prejudices. But, most importantly, there is always a trace of covert satire upon the narrow conservatism of the Tory country gentleman of his day. As C.T. Winchester puts it, Sir Roger is the typical conservative English country gentleman of the Queen Anne time, not taking kindly to new ideas, but sturdy, honest, order-loving, of large heart and simple manners. Reminds you of Lord Robert Crawley of Downton Abbey? We'll see. Here's for you Joseph Addison's essay, Sir Roger in Church. I am always very well pleased with a country Sunday, and think if keeping holy the seventh day were only a human institution, it would be the best method that could have been thought of for the polishing and civilizing of mankind. It is certain the country people would soon degenerate into a kind of savages and barbarians were there not such frequent returns of a stated time, in which the whole village meet together with their best faces and in their cleanliest habits to converse with one another upon indifferent subjects, hear their duties explained to them, and join together in adoration of the Supreme Being. Sunday clears away the rust of the whole week, not only as it refreshes in their minds the notions of religion, but as it puts both the sexes, upon appearing in their most agreeable forms and exerting all such qualities as are apt to give them a figure in the eye of the village. A country fellow distinguishes himself as much in the churchyard as a citizen does upon the change, the whole parish politics being generally discussed in that place, either after sermon or before the bell rings. My friend Sir Roger, being a good churchman, has beautified the inside of his church with several texts of his own choosing. He has likewise given a handsome pulpit cloth and railed in the communion table at his own expense. He has often told me that at his coming to his estate he found his parishioners very irregular, and that in order to make them kneel and join in the responses, he gave every one of them a hassock and a common prayer book, and at the same time employed an itinerant singing master who goes about the country for that purpose to instruct them rightly in the tunes of the psalms, upon which they now very much value themselves, and indeed outdo most of the country churches that I have ever heard. As Sir Roger is a landlord to the whole congregation, he keeps them in very good order, and will suffer nobody to sleep in it besides himself. For if by chance he has been surprised into a short nap at sermon, upon recovering out of it, he stands up and looks about him, and if he sees anybody else nodding, either wakes them himself or sends his servants to them. Several other of the old knight's particularities break out upon these occasions. Sometimes he will be lengthening out a verse in the singing psalms, half a minute, after the rest of the congregation have done with it. Sometimes, when he is pleased with the matter of his devotion, he pronounces Amen 3 or 4 times to the same prayer, and sometimes stands up when everybody else is upon their knees to count the congregation or see if any of his tenants are missing. I was yesterday very much surprised to hear my old friend, in the midst of the service, calling out to one John Matthews to mind what he was about, and not disturb the congregation. This John Matthews, it seems, is remarkable for being an idle fellow, and at the same time was kicking his heels for his diversion. This authority of the knight, though exerted in that odd manner which accompanies him in all circumstances of life, has a very good effect upon the parish, who are not polite enough to see anything ridiculous in his behaviour. Besides that, the general good sense and worthiness of his character makes his friends observe these little singularities as foils that rather set off than blemish his good qualities. As soon as the sermon is finished, nobody presumes to stir till Sir Roger is gone out of the church. The knight walks down from his seat in the chancel between a double row of his tenants that stand bowing to him on each side, and every now and then inquires how such an one's wife or mother or son or father do, whom he does not see at church, which is understood as a secret reprimand to the person that is absent. The chaplain has often told me that upon a catechizing day, when Sir Roger has been pleased with a boy that answers well, he has ordered a Bible to be given him next day for his encouragement, and sometimes accompanies it with a flitch of bacon to his mother. Sir Roger has likewise added £5 a year to the clerk's place, and that he may encourage the young fellows to make themselves perfect in the church service, has promised upon the death of the present incumbent, who is very old, to bestow it according to merit. The fair understanding between Sir Roger and his chaplain and their mutual concurrence in doing good is the more remarkable because the very next village is famous for the differences and contentions that arise between the parson and the squire, who live in a perpetual state of war. The parson is always preaching at the squire, and the squire, to be revenged on the parson, never comes to church. The squire has made all his tenants atheists and tithe stealers, while the parson instructs them every Sunday in the dignity of his order and insinuates them in almost every sermon that he is a better man than his patron. In short, matters are come to such an extremity that the squire has not said his prayers either in public or private this half year, and that the parson threatens him, if he does not mend his manners, to pray for him in the face of the whole congregation. Feuds of this nature, though too frequent in the country, are very fatal to the ordinary people, who are so used to be dazzled with riches that they pay as much deference to the understanding of a man of an estate as of a man of learning, and are very hardly brought to regard any truth, how important soever it may be, that is preached to them, when they know there are several men of 500 a year who do not believe it. So that was Sir Roger de Coverley for you in his church. So tell me, does he resemble Robert Crawley of Downton Abbey? Maybe, only a little bit, given they are both British aristocrats, but then they are again nearly 300 years apart. To be honest, Sir Roger in church slightly reminds me of Comte de Renault, played by Alfred Molina in Lasse Hallström's Chocolat, which is again an adaptation of Joan Harris's novel of the same name. Comte de Renault, the traditional village mayor who literally forces people into the church, dictates sermons to the meek parson and considers Vianne, a chocolatier protagonist, as an evil tempter during Lent. Well, not exactly similar, but there are certain traits. Renault seems to be a little exaggerated, a little more extra eccentric, which Sir Roger is not. Sir Roger is much warmer, much charming, and much caring, perhaps. Do let me know what you think of Sir Roger and what you liked best about this episode. Again, I would be grateful if you shared this episode with a friend you think will like it. To make sharing easy, Reading Reveries is also now available on YouTube. You could also leave a review on your own platforms because reviews help other people find the show. So that's it then for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening, and be sure to tune in again for a new episode of Reading Reveries soon. Until then, keep well and have a good day.